Palm Beach County is a very large county. There's a great number of people reporting crimes, in particular sex crimes.
Last fiscal year, we assisted 623 rape victims, but we only had around 225 forensic exams. We were losing the ability to provide the immediate crisis response and forensic care from the crises all the way through prosecution. The SART program stands for Sexual Assault Response Team, and it's a special way to approach sexual assault cases in a community. The basic SART team includes an advocate, law enforcement, the sexual assault nurse examiners, forensics, and prosecution.
The primary objective in the SART team is to protect the victim, gather a detailed statement or interview with the victim in a safe environment, to develop hopefully a suspect, and ultimately it's to make the victim feel comfortable enough in meeting with all of these team players so we can develop a good case which will lead to an arrest and hopefully a conviction.
As part of the SART protocols, we have now a facility called the Butterfly House, which is located at the Wellington Regional Medical Center. It's a separate site adjacent to the emergency room dedicated to assist victims through the forensic evidence collection, their medical care, and the facility is also available for law enforcement to do their video and audio interviews of the victim. It's one homey, confined place for a victim to receive everything they need as part of the crisis intervention, the medical care, and the investigation part.
The person who's going to have the greatest benefit is the victim themselves, because they're going to feel more comfortable going through this entire process in a setting that makes them feel at ease and makes them feel comfortable.
Let's take a typical case. Let's say it's a young adult who is at a bar with friends having a good time. And perhaps those friends went elsewhere, and the problem is we have predators that are in our community. And they watch for vulnerable victims. In this case, perhaps there was over drinking, or perhaps some drugs were slipped into the drinks. Well, the victim now becomes even more vulnerable. The victim needs a ride to her car, or maybe even a ride home because she drank too much. The offender took an opportunity of this victim. He has her confined in a car and rapes her. So he shoves her out of the car, get rid of her. So what is she going to do now?
911, what's your emergency?
Can someone please help me? I just been raped.
Okay, where did this happen at?
Typically get a 911 call
Okay.
from a victim who is at some type of scene, whether it's the scene of the crime or a place that they have moved to in order to feel safer in reporting the crime. We'll get the phone call.
Okay, what was he wearing, do you know?
On these sex crimes cases, you have your initial responding officer, whether it's a city police officer or a road patrol deputy.
Hey, Bravo 3-2, go ahead.
Signal 35, 7715 Forest Hill Boulevard, Oka-Healy Park.
After that phone call is received, a deputy or a law enforcement officer will respond to that victim's location and take an initial statement. It's a fact-finding type of interview. We want to know what happened, where it happened, who it involves, and if the victim has been injured physically in any way, that needs to be treated at a local hospital first. In typical cases, if it's a complaint of sexual assault with no obvious injuries, we will then transport the victim to the Butterfly House.
When the victim calls 911, a detective is called.
Detective Wells.
The detective would determine that a crime probably has occurred, and will call for an advocate. The advocate will determine if a forensic exam may be needed, so the advocate calls the SANE nurse.
Hi, Sandy.
And they all meet together at the Butterfly House in order to start the process assisting the victim.
There is a pool of 6 nurses, myself included, that respond to the Butterfly House. We respond 24/7. We will come here to meet the law enforcement and the victim to do the forensic exam.
Hi.
Hi, I have Susie.
Once the victim arrives here, I will tell them what the process is, make sure they understand what a forensic exam involves. A forensic exam involves very detailed examination of the victim of a sexual assault. Our nurses are very well trained to find collection of the DNA. We will be looking over her body to try to find foreign materials, whether it be hair that does not belong to her, a blade of grass, body fluids, looking for injuries, photographing the injuries. We then will collect her clothing and we will put it into evidence bags for the detective.
We have in the Butterfly House shower facility, we have personal care items, we have clothing, all sizes, male and female, and the ability for them to shower and to refresh themselves before they leave the facility.
The Butterfly House has created an environment that once the victim is in the facility with an advocate and nurse, the law enforcement officers can meet right outside the door of this facility.
Her name is Susie Miller. Date of birth is...
She's really less likely to feel like there's an invasion of her privacy because the number of people that are at the facility is limited compared to the number of people that you'll see in a regular hospital. It's important that we meet with those officers right away, and what we're looking for is spontaneous statements that the victim may have said on top of just the normal information gathering from that victim.
From an advocate's point of view, it's easy as a crisis responder to have everybody working together on behalf of the victim. The victim feels like people care and they're getting the best quality care because they have trained people working for them and with them. Hi,
Hey, Sandy.
Tom.
How are you?
Welcome.
Nice.
I'd like you to meet Susie.
Hey, Susie.
Susie.
Detective Wallace.
When the assigned detectives on these
Detective
sexual
Wallace
assault
will be taking your
cases
statement.
make contact with the victim after making contact with law enforcement, they're going to do so inside the Butterfly House.
I want to talk to you about what happened to you tonight. You okay with that?
What we do is we really just try to make the victim feel at ease. The fact that there's a detective actually on scene doing the follow-up investigation, we hope will make the victim feel like the appropriate steps are being taken in her case to conduct this type of investigation. We do a sworn taped interview with her. We have recording equipment available. It's transferred to CD, so we're able to leave the Butterfly House with a CD or DVD in hand of that interview. And upon completing that interview, we explain to her what the next steps are going to be in the process.
Better report. I won't forget anything.
Palm Beach County Victim Services is there to serve him or her and making sure that they really get a full grasp of what the criminal justice process involves from beginning to end to possibly their testimony in court.
When the interview is done, they can also have access to crisis counseling and further on down the road in order to make this a full component of caring for the victim. We have therapy available also through the sexual assault response team.
I'm going to have Deputy Brown drive you back home, and I'm just going to get the evidence and we'll go, okay?
After that initial investigation begins, evidence will be collected and maintained in a sexual assault examination kit that will be later transferred to an evidence department here in the county, depending on the agency, and it will be maintained until the kit is processed for any evidence for trial purposes.
I obtain the bag of evidence. Once it's in my care and custody, I will screen that item of evidence for any potential body fluids, such as blood or semen. I could also swab items of evidence for touch, or if something was left behind by a suspect, I can also process that to see who wore the item. What's important to us is that the evidence is collected. If it's never collected, we can't test it. We can't get a DNA profile. So if you have an individual that's trained on what to look for, how to collect it, there's a better possibility, if the evidence is there, that it's collected and we'll be able to obtain it and then potentially get a DNA profile from it.
Once the victim's statement is taken, the criminal investigators go out and do their job. They attempt to locate a suspect and they develop their case. Hopefully the goal is to develop probable cause for an arrest. If probable cause is developed, the next goal would be locating the suspect, making that arrest.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands.
And then ultimately having a successful prosecution of the case at the state attorney's level.
Good afternoon, Judge. I'm here on behalf of the state. The state is asking that the defendant be held no bond. We've had contact with the victim and the victim is on board for prosecution. Sexual assault response team have implemented a protocol or procedure that helps these state attorneys in being able to preserve the evidence, that helps these state attorneys in being able to have a successful prosecution. The sexual assault response team is there for the victim to collect the evidence and assisting the victim with the process and being on board to go forward with the prosecution. Filing a motion to take DNA samples from the defendant. I think it's important that everyone understands that at the center of all of this is the victim, meeting the needs of the victim, ultimately what the case is centered around.
The hopes of the SART program and the facility here at the Butterfly House is to help in the long run to make a safer community.
SART is more effective than what our past practices were in investigating sex crimes and dealing with sex crimes victims, because this way we have one central location. The victim will be more comfortable in this location. We have advocates and nurses that respond with law enforcement to this location, and we can all meet together and start this investigation within a reasonable amount of time and with greater effectiveness because of the team-centered approach in dealing with sex crime assaults.